GM. GM. Today's lesson, I'm going to talk about not knowing what to do with your life, finding meaning or purpose in your life. And this one's really, it's funny because this is basically going out to anyone young. By young, probably like 21 or under. And I think that if any of you are listening to this and you're older than that, you'll totally understand what I'm saying. So I got a question from a student who was saying that he's been extremely indecisive for the past 3 years, ever since he left school. And it's basically like, doesn't know what to do. You're just frozen, right? Needs help to figure out how to use his brain again. Lost in my own environment. My brain refuses to cooperate with the rest of my body. Mentality has affected every aspect of my life. Don't know what to do. Can't focus. Can't remember the last time I was able to focus. What you have done, and this goes for everyone, you have gotten yourself into a rut. You've allowed yourself to get into a place where you are essentially just spinning further and further and further out of control. Right? It's like this snowballing effect of you leave school and then you don't have the next thing planned, and so you end up just sort of doing nothing or taking a job somewhere, but not a job that you're passionate about. You just have a job to make some money, but then you realize after a few months, I don't want to be doing this. Like, I thought my life would be better than working in McDonald's. Like, that's what I did, right? And so then you quit that job and you go and do something else. But then that thing doesn't work out either because, it's not something you're passionate about. And then this also happens to people in the campuses, right? So for me, nothing like this exists. This kind of place didn't exist when I was young. If only it did, it would have saved me years. So what it was for me was I dropped out of school too. So I left school at 16, 17. Basically a year early. And thought I didn't want to go to school. Like, I thought I didn't want to go to college, to university, right? I was like, fuck that. I don't want to do that. I want to make money. And at the time, I was working part-time in McDonald's. And I just kept doing that for a while. I was like, I'm not going to work at McDonald's. Obviously, I'm going to do this, make some money. I'm going to start my own business. So I did that. I saved some money up. I quit that job. I started my own business. That didn't go well. I finished that. Like, I had to close that up. And then I just started working jobs, odd jobs here and there. I was like, because I had no skills, right? I came out of school, but I didn't have like trade skills. So I would go and work on a building site, but I would be like just a laborer. Then I would work in a shop, or I would work in, whatever. Literally just basic shit jobs. And then I got into a rut where I was like, because I had no school, right? I wasn't going to school. I didn't have a job that I was passionate about. I didn't have any skill, like strong skill. And I was 17. I was like, so what am I doing? Like, if I want to get a degree, it's like 4 years. If I want to get a trade, to be a plumber, be an electrician, whatever, again, that's like 3-4 years. And as I just kept trying to think of what to do, nothing appealed. Because the only thing I really wanted to do was make money and have a business. But even that wasn't like well formed. It was just because I didn't want to work for someone else. And I see this a lot with students where they don't want to work for someone else, but they're young. You're 15, 16, 17, 18. And then you come in and you do one of the campuses and you don't give it enough time. You just don't. You spend a lot of time learning and nothing sticks. But that nothing sticks thing, that is because you just don't give it enough time. It might take 2 years to get good at a skill. It takes at least a year to get good at any skill. When I started when I started trading, it took me a year. I was going to say when I started sales, but I was like, in a crazy turn of events, I was really good at sales from day one. I don't know how, but that's absolutely the exception. Everyone I worked with in sales and everyone I trained as in my sales team, they all took about a year to get good. And then after that, they were flying. And some of them realized after a year, it's not what I want to do. Most of them realized I really love this and they kept going. Trading, definitely for me. I thought I knew what I was doing after 3 months. I didn't. I thought I knew what I was doing after 6 months. I didn't. It was after a year I was like, okay, there's still so much more I need to learn, but I feel like I'm starting to get this. The point I'm making to the student who asked and to everybody else is the reason you feel that way is because you left school. And I know that sounds counterintuitive because you're like, but I hate school. I didn't want to be in school. I didn't like school. But school was your identity. You're not suffering from indecision. You're suffering from a lack of identity. You don't know who you are. You don't have a purpose. And it's imperative for every man and woman, but I'll just speak for myself as a man, that you must have a purpose in life. That does not mean you need to know exactly where your life is going, but you have to have a mountain to climb. And it can be anything. It does not have to be something you're super passionate about. It needs to be something that is difficult. The more difficult, the better. That's why sales falls into it. Extremely difficult to learn how to sell, to be able to persuade people, to be able to speak. A lot of people just have a problem with speaking to strangers. There's a lot of hurdles you have to overcome. And then you've got the competitive nature and the money-driven aspect where it's work. Trading, nothing more difficult. It's very, very hard to ever feel like you're not working when you're a trader. Because every day it's difficult. Every day there's challenges. Every day there's things to overcome. You don't have a lot of time to sit around and feel sorry for yourself. So what has happened is that you've left school and your identity, which before was a student, is no longer that. And if you go from that, this is interesting because this is exactly what happened to me. I didn't like school, but when I was in school, that was my identity. That was my purpose. I was a student. All my friends were students. We were all doing the same thing. So I would go to school, hang around with my friends. After school, I would hang around with my friends. I would go home. I would do whatever I have to do. And I'd go back to school. And so you don't sit back and think, oh, I'm doing nothing with my life. Because in your brain, you're like, well, I'm in school. Even if you don't like it, it's your identity. And so it's very hard to feel that lack of decision. You don't have any decisions to make. You're just a student. When I then dropped out, it wasn't long before I was completely just fucked. I didn't know what to do. I spent a year basically just not knowing what I was doing and getting worse and worse and worse to the point where I was just completely confused, completely depressed. That was what I would have said. Oh, I'm depressed. But really all I was doing was just feeling sorry for myself because I wouldn't get myself out of my rut and go and work at whatever it was. And what actually got me out of it was I decided to go back to school because I'd started my business and then I started to like the idea of business, but it didn't go well. And I was like, okay, maybe I need to learn business. Turned out to be obviously wrong. I went back, finished school, went to university, went and did business. The actual degree doesn't teach you anything about business, but what was good about it was it gave me a purpose again. I was like, oh, so I'm going to go back, finish school, go to university, finish that. So there you have a new mountain to climb. The mountain is now finishing school, finishing university, getting on out. Then when I finished university, the exact same thing cropped up. Literally, the day my exams ended, the very next day I was like, what next? Because at that time I was working, I was working in the gambling industry, but just working in it for a company, and it wasn't like a long-term thing. And I finished my university, and I was like, oh, so now I'm finished. Now I've completed university, and I'm working in this company, but I don't want to work here. I was working there because it was something I could do while I was a student. Straight away, the same thing hit me again. It was like this whole fear of what's my life purpose? What am I doing? What am I supposed to be doing? But because it had happened to me before, I knew exactly what to do. I was like, oh, I need a new challenge. So I ended up fucking moving to a different country, going into sales, just threw a bunch of challenges at myself, and I never looked back. And from that, I've always realized that any time you feel indecisive, it's because you are not doing something that is difficult enough. It's not. A lot of people think they're indecisive because everything's really hard and they've got a load of responsibilities and it's hard to do this and that and this. It's not. You need to have a purpose. But a purpose doesn't have to be something that you're super dead passionate about. It just needs to be something difficult that takes your mind off of what is my purpose. Your purpose is to improve. You can do that with anything. But you're not going to improve if you're working at McDonald's because there's no path to improvement there. You're not going to improve if you're sweeping the street. So it has to be something challenging to you. You are more than capable of doing anything, right? Anything you want to do. So that's why you don't feel good when you're working dead-end jobs or when you're not in school or whatever. The reason people feel that achievement from getting good grades is because it's difficult. If you're top of the class, that means you're the best in the class. Even if you're in the top 20%, you're still outperforming. Right? And if you're not driven by academic achievements, same thing. Go and get a sales job and become the best salesman in your company. Go and do it. Why can't you? And what you realize as you go is that most of what you have, there's this thing, I don't know if it's ever been studied, but this is the part I said at the beginning. Anyone listening who's over 21 or 22, depending on your age, certainly over 25, you'll know this. I am convinced that there's something in, especially a man, like a young man's brain, that if he doesn't have a battle to go to, a mountain to climb, something difficult to do, that he is going to tend towards that depressive feeling and not knowing what to do with his life. And it's probably something to do with hundreds of years ago, maybe not even that long ago. 100 years ago, World War I and then World War II and everything since, at 19, you were in a ditch fighting for your life, right? So we are so fucking lucky and we're so spoiled, basically all of us, to have the lives we do. But I've always felt there is some lack of adversity that is just ingrained in the modern world, and especially for young men who are looking for a purpose, right? Because until you have children and pass on your bloodline and pass on your genes and start building your legacy through your kids, you don't know what your purpose is. And that's why you have to make it. It has to be a battle. It has to be challenging. That's why men go off and try and become professional fighters. That's why men go off and try and take over the business world and become the best salesman, the CEO. This is why we're driven to do these things. Because otherwise, you're going to feel that feeling of indecisiveness and lack of purpose, and that all leads to very negative places. But the good news is, you can just brute force your way out of it. I did it 3 times. From when I was leaving school, when I was leaving university, and then when I was leaving my sales job. I brute forced it into trading. So, the only action you need to take is some action. The hardest part of all of this is actually just taking that first step. And so if you don't know what you want to do, I am telling you right now, this is for anyone, if you don't know what you want to do, if you left school, you're no longer identified as a student, right? And you don't know what your next identity is, go and get a sales job. Go to the Business Mastery campus, ask Professor Arno for some advice, go to any sales company in your area and go and work in sales. And commit to being the best salesperson in that company, get competitive, and I guarantee you, you will never have a moment of feeling unfulfilled from then on.